Well, hello again. Dr. Welgan here. Welcome back for those of you who have been following along with me here in this series. And welcome to those of you who are just joining us. I am Dr. Peter Welgan, a clinical psychologist, research psychologist, and a psychophysiologist. Also, the director of behavioral medicine, my own Center for Behavioral Medicine. Okay? Um, for those of you who were with me yesterday, we were talking about moving into a different series of very interesting problems for me, and I hope for you. And these are disorders of the gastrointestinal tract. As you remember yesterday, I indicated that we would be talking about 4 different disorders that have been of interest to me for some years. One is irritable bowel syndrome. The other one is colitis, Crohn's disease, and GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. We'll be talking about each one of those disorders in each of the succeeding sessions, okay? However, today we're talking about irritable bowel syndrome. Ever since my days as a graduate student at Wisconsin, where I actually was very interested in peptic ulcer and how to actually regulate hydrochloric acid secretions from the parietal cells of patients who are actually suffering from excessive hydrochloric acid and peptic ulcer disease. We've moved on, and I have been doing an awful lot of work in the past number of years, since 1971, at the University of California, Irvine, Department of Medicine, Medical School, and the Division of Gastroenterology. I keep pointing over here because that's UCI over there, right across the street, okay? So if I do that, you know what I'm talking about. So in any event, we're talking about irritable bowel syndrome. Why has that been such an interest to me? Well, number one, as a psychophysiologist who is studying chronic long-term conditions that are actually resistant to conventional medical intervention to a large extent. They continue, can be treated, but they are chronic and long-term. I'm really interested in those. One of them is irritable bowel syndrome. Well, what is irritable bowel syndrome? Anybody out there have IBS? Hey, yeah, lots. Let me tell you, this condition, irritable bowel syndrome, is one of the most familiar GI complaints your family doctor listens to and your gastroenterologist. Irritable bowel syndrome. It is widespread, okay, particularly in the industrialized world and here in the United States. So irritable bowel syndrome is a very common complaint in your doctor's office, along with gastroesophageal reflux disease, which we'll be talking about later, okay? What is irritable bowel syndrome for those of you who are not afflicted by this problem? For those of you who are, hey, look, this is probably old hat for you, stick around because there's some hope being able to actually modulate these problems from a behavioral point of view in the future. I want to talk to you about that later, okay? What is it? Well, it's an irritable bowel. That means it's in the bowel. It's a large bowel. It's the colon, okay? It's also been called spastic colon in the past. It's a condition here that has no clear underlying disease process. And because of the no disease etiology, it's actually a functional problem with that organ. The organ's okay, it's healthy, It's just that it's behaving in such an irregular fashion. Not sure exactly why. Got a lot of ideas, but nothing really nailed down specifically, okay, in terms of being able to treat it and eliminate it. Okay, so your physician treats the functional part of the condition with a lot of medications here that are good for a while. Got to be a little careful if you stay on them. There's often a downside to them that you can discuss with your physician. It's a motor disorder. What does that mean? Have you ever seen a colon? Probably not. Okay. I have real interesting. If you hold that colon in your hand, which you cannot do, you'll notice that it does some really interesting things. There's a lot of activity going on in that structure. Okay? If you notice that there are some undulating movements in that colon that are really called motor functions of the colon. There are two primary motor functions of the colon. One of them is a transporting-like function that allows the waste products from the small intestine to be transported distally to the rectum and then out to the Dewey dumpster. Okay? That's called peristalsis. The other motor disorder, look carefully, you'll notice that there is sort of a squeezing, undulating activity, and that's designed to actually remove any nutrients from any of the foodstuffs coming down that still remain in the waste product. So that is called a desiccating activity. Desiccation, peristalsis. You get a lot of peristalsis with very little desiccation. Guess what you get? You get diarrhea. Boom, boom. Okay? It doesn't slow down. Okay? On the other hand, if you get a lot of that and none of that, guess what happens? It's constipation. Okay? So over the years now, decades, I have had irritable bowel patients with predominantly diarrhea, and those who have predominantly constipation. Okay? They're both wicked conditions. Okay? If you're fortunate enough, you have both. Great. Okay. 1 minute I'm constipated, the next, wow, where's the toilet? That is a devilish combination. Both constipation and diarrhea, and they tend to swing like a pendulum. Okay? Pain and discomfort often associated with this. You'll notice, for those of you who have this condition, that the discomfort and the pain subside upon defecation, actually having a bowel movement. For a while, you think, it's over. No. It is for that brief period, okay? Bloating, very common. How many of you out there notice that you bloat? Gas buildup in the intestines, okay? That's very common as well. You'll also notice something else, that your colon is very sensitive to a wide range of stimuli out there. We already know that if you're under some stress, it can disrupt motor function even further. If you're anxious, depressed, if you're having any kind of mental problems that put you under a sustained state of distress, that colon tends to react very quickly to those kinds of psychological states, okay? It also reacts overly and oversensitivity to even things like food. Okay, so from food to psychiatric problems, the colon is a very sensitive organ in the body. It's almost like the canary in the mine shaft, so to speak, the cliche. Drop the canary in a cage, and a mine shaft comes up and it's dead. Carbon monoxide down there, you don't go down there. Well, the colon is like an early warning signal, hypersensitive to even mild to moderate stressors. Okay, it kind of lets you know that the rest of the body is experiencing something, but you don't feel it in the rest of the body as sensitively as you do in the colon. So that is almost like the identified organ of the body that's the signaling mechanism. It tends to overreact, but lets you know that something's happening to the rest of me too. Okay? Got it? Good. So, with this condition, you can live with this condition literally the rest of your life. I mean, it's a real difficult one. Okay? As I say, there are pharmacologic agents here that have to be used rather prudently, and you learn how to adjust your life, become very sensitive to your colon. As I say, I've been working with clinically and in research with irritable bowel patients for a long time. I recall about 20 years ago, I had a fellow that I saw through my Center for Behavioral Medicine and Gastroenterology here at UCI. Saw him clinically, treated him. He claimed to have 40 bowel movements a day. What do you do with 40 bowel movements? You have to be totally dehydrated to begin with, okay? And he had diarrhea, okay? He had already taken 6 months off of work on a medical leave when his gastroenterologist referred him to me, okay? He's about ready to lose his job, okay? We worked together for about 3 months. He went back to work, okay? Stable. Okay, so there seems to be a way out of this if one were to look at the possibility of a procedure here. Frankly, it's been around in my field for quite a long time. Okay, so I say that because for my diarrhea patients, it's been a real blessing. For my constipation patients, I work very closely with gastroenterologists. This chronic constipation is a real interesting problem that they have to deal with. I had one patient who had a constipation for 45 days straight. Keep in mind, you can become so impacted that surgery is required, okay, to relieve the distress. But actually, to be constipated for a month and a half straight, you can imagine what it does to the rest of the biological system of the body. Okay. And I want to mention something too before I draw to a close today. Brief introduction. Later down the line, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about, what do you do about all this? But that comes later in the series. I want to commend my wife. We've been married for a long time, okay? And I learned, it was a slow learner at this, but I learned. You go out to dinner with friends, and everybody's talking about, what's going on in life, what are you doing, and not uncommonly somebody makes a mistake of asking me what I do. And I said, hey, can I tell you a little bit about your colon? at dinner. Well, man, I'm just right behind the lectern here. Man, is that deadly at dinner with friends? Okay. So anyway, we're talking about the colon, and it isn't long before I notice people getting up and going to the bathroom for really long periods of time, until I finish. My wife has had to put up with this for a long time. Okay. She has become so conditioned to this that as soon as, I used to watch her either get up, go to the bathroom, and where'd she go, or else just fall asleep in her soup. It got so conditioned, if you will, that as soon as I opened up my mouth, she'd fall asleep in her soup. So I learned to shut up about this, what I do for a living here with my friends. I lost a few friends along the way. But for those of you who have this condition, you know how delicate it is. Generally, it's not the kind of thing you bring up at dinner, okay? But it is a devilish condition to live with, okay? So stick with me in this series, because down the line here, after we complete this 4-session series on GI disorders, I'd like to talk to you a little bit more about how did I get into this, and why did I find it so fascinating that there may be a way of actually regulating organ system function yourself. Okay, look for me tomorrow, and I'm going to be talking about ulcerative colitis, one of the inflammatory bowel diseases, okay? Real nasty stuff, okay? I'll see you tomorrow.